Ali, founder of Wilbe. Thanks for making time to talk with us and tell us what you're doing about Wilbe. For me, I guess one of the main things that I wanted to do at CERN was to showcase people what's available, who are helping scientists become entrepreneurs, what tools are there. So the first challenge is not knowing what's out there, right? And so we've invited people in the ecosystem to come talk about what they're building, why they're building, so that you might not be doing a startup now, but you might be thinking about entrepreneurship down the line. So the whole series of these talks that we're recording and having people come to CERN is just to create the awareness of what's available. So for me, people who scientists are good people, and I've talked with you and Devika quite a bit. Thanks for taking the time to tell us what you do, and and look forward to hearing more about what you guys do.
Thank you for the time. It's really exciting to get an insight into CERN. And earlier this summer when we met in person in Geneva and got a tour, that was mind opening, and especially being able to speak with your colleagues and showcase a little bit of the work that we have done in science and how that could be relevant for CERN. But today is great to kind of recap that, or if you like, look with more clarity around the specifics of the way that we interpret science commercialization, how we started, and the why, perhaps, and then, if anything, bounce thoughts with you around what's the future of the sector, if we can call it as such. I have put together a few slides. Would that help if I kind of share? And, yeah. So let me do that now if I can, and it's on a PDF. There we go. So can you see this?
Yes, I can.
And it's not in presentator mode. I don't remember how to get to present this, but I think that it's fine.
Yeah.
You may be able to see them
Perfect.
Anyhow, like this. Excellent. So fundamentally, will be started from the realization that there were some core principles and dynamics in science, and this was at a time before the pandemic and before, if you like, the explosion of climate change and the necessity of finding climate solutions. So it was still at a time when the majority of the world was still focused on B2B enterprise software, so to speak, as a form of innovation. Our realization was that a lot of the solutions that we needed as a society were embedded in science. And here, we recognize a couple of familiar faces, both in material sciences and in life science. And then the second realization is that scientists were transitioning from being like this underground white coat wearers, highly technical individuals, to being at the front line of the conversation. And here, you may remember when Professor Gilbert was given a standing ovation at Wimbledon in 2021, which is a first, if you like, for a scientist to receive such notoriety. And the third realization, in a practical sense, was that the more that we spent time on campuses, the more that we realized that there were fundamental flaws in the way that science could transition to the real world and drive impact through business. And so we kind of put some, and these are some now publicly available data, but at the time, these are the ones that really impressed us. For example, the fact that only a tiny proportion of the postdoc researchers that, if you like, are some of the most intellectually capable individuals in the world, highly trained, they spent some 15-20 years mastering their subject expertise. Only a very small percentage, i.e. 0.5%, makes it to becoming a tenured professor. And so they end up staying within academia or going and work for the third sector or within large industrial groups, but very few of them are prompted or encouraged to pursue their own industrial path, if you like. Another data that now is commonly available, which is great. There have been multiple articles and if you like, small fights over the press between investors in science or investors in deep tech and TTO's representative around what is a fair spin-out deal. But still in many parts of Europe, and particularly the UK where we're based, we still see that the average portion of the company that is taken by universities is very, very high compared to what is the case in the US, which is the mothership of how to commercialize science. And then the main realization was that, in effect, for how much we were looking at existing spin-out companies, there was no consistent story over how that happened. It didn't feel like any of this company came out through a standardized process. And so really here, and very much like, for those that are cinema lovers or that have watched The Matrix, we realized that while we felt that we were in a world with big rules, actually we were able to create new rules. We were able to bend, in effect, rules that were imposed for not sometimes not practical reasons. And so we caught up with the problems, and we were like super determined to do something about it. And eventually we started putting together, okay, so if we are to do something about it, what are we going to do? Are we going to create another fund and queue up for deal flow? Are we going to create another incubator that provides very light support over a very short period of time for money that really in science is not very relevant? 100K doesn't really take you anywhere in science. And so from a fundamental perspective, we realized that the industry or scientists could use support throughout the entire cycle of spinning out. So from day one, i.e. when the scientist is still an individual and is still perhaps at the exploratory stage, to the point whereby they are in a position to raise capital or have raised capital, and they need to use this capital, put this capital to use. So the entire cycle, if you like. And the second aspect is that we realized that there was a lot of siloed conversation. So first of all, from a geographical perspective, you'd find, the university, would have its own ecosystem, and there would be no incentive. In fact, the encouragement would be that of trying to maintain the entire ecosystem within that silo, so that the scientists would only find a co-founder within that specific regional or faculty aspect, and would only raise funding from the local investors, and would only work with local clients. And we couldn't understand why. If you want to be the best in the world, you might as well try and attract the best talent in the world and try to work with the best companies in the world and investors in the world. And the second aspect that we realized is that there was this standardized approach over how, okay, so you are a company in a specific subject matter, and there is no reason why you should be interacting or having creative thinking sessions with entrepreneurs that are in a different science subject, but they're nonetheless scientists, and they're also trying to figure out how to commercialize a technology. And so this is, for example, the great divide that there is between life sciences and material sciences, and over how now, for example, over already the last 18 months, 2 years, we're seeing over how quite a lot of spinouts are leveraging the use of new materials in, for example, the development of organoids that make the drug discovery more effective. So strong of that principle that we needed to create an environment that was incentivizing communication and cross-pollination, as we call it. And then the last bit is that we realized that a lot of the centralized information and data and network centers were in the hands of the university. And so by default, all of the private entities and individuals that were around the university that wanted to do something within science, they were by default trying to build a relationship with the university or with the tech transfer office. But for us, that was not the key stakeholder. For us, the stakeholder of relevance whenever you want to commercialize science is the inventor, i.e. the scientist. And so rather than trying to befriend the university and try to get on the good books so that we could get deal flow or whatever form of public partnerships, we focused, let's try to understand our key customer, our key client and user, and how can we best serve scientists, even though that may put us in a difficult light with the university. So starting from scratch, we were able to design from scratch, if you like. And really the overall ambition was to create a venture group that was entirely dedicated and solely dedicated to the commercialization of science, and that was allowing scientists to think at scale, and for us as well to be able to work at scale without compromising on the quality of the result. Now, we probably benefited from the fact that we didn't come strictly from an academic environment. So, for example, Devika, my co-founder, she's not a scientist herself, as I'm not, but we have worked for the last 10 years within commercialization of frontier technology. So I've done this first as a solicitor, as a legal professional in the UK, specifically on medical devices and specifically on helping companies that were coming out of university. And then from there, I built a couple of portfolios on a sweat for equity model, which basically means that you're able to secure this, if you like, relationship with founders, where you are providing support, and in exchange you get paid with the shares. And Devika herself had started off her career working within Yale, within the tech transfer at Yale, but then eventually moving on into private industry and being within the first team that attempted the commercialization of artificial intelligence within IBM Watson in New York City. So coming with, if you like, this fresh mindset, yet with an understanding of the challenges of commercializing frontier technology, we kicked off Wilbe as the home for scientist leaders, and it's really broken down in some different flows. It starts chronologically. We could imagine it as the beginning of the journey. So this is where we meet the majority of the scientists. And we started off with, okay, let's see if we can provide skills. And skills stands for Wilbe Skills Limited, which is an independent education company that runs multiple courses. And so, for example, you see here BSF, BSO, BPM, they all stand for a particular skill set that we teach to stakeholders within science commercialization. BSF is our key fellowship. We're currently finishing class number 7. And this is a class that is geared towards postdoc researchers. So postdoc researchers since the beginning have been our core target user. We felt that they were the ones that were the most underserved and also under or mistreated almost by the hierarchical systems of academia. And so this course is, and all of the courses are aimed at providing very practical skill sets to stakeholders that then we wish to see flourish within business. We are instructors, but we also, and in fact, we mostly work with instructors that are coming from a background of science commercialization, in particular from the US. So the majority log in for the courses and have been teaching with us since the beginning. We have the privilege of now being an official supplier to a whole range of universities across the UK, Europe, and now institutes. So, and we're very proud of the work that we're doing also with you at CERN, but most recently also with EMBO and with Francis Crick and with Henry Royce Institute. And so we have this growing appeal that, if you like, is led by the community itself. So our alumni help us grow the number of courses number of classes that we run. What happens after skills is that fundamentally, and this is limited to the capacity that I have as a venture builder and Devika has as a venture builder, but every quarter we select from each of the classes about 3 fellows, and these fellows are aligned with us in terms of the mission to be achieved, the quality of the science, and the ambition. And so if we see value in that, then we would say, okay, we can act as your interim COO, if you like. So this is pre-spin out, there may be an application for a patent, but it's certainly that has not been granted yet most of the time. It is pre-team, so it may be just the scientist or the inventor with another scientific colleague, but there's a whole, the whole business infrastructure is missing. It's pre-client, which is a key aspect of validating the technology, and pre-fundraising. And so we take the company from zero pre-incorporation to a stage when it's able to raise funding. And that typically takes us some 9 months of intense working. So every day, calls and co-drafting of any document, and taking taking part to all of the meetings with potential clients and partners, and helping interview potential candidates to join the team, and co-founders as well. So it's very, very hands-on, and that, if you like, allows us to make sure that all the companies that we build come out with a high qualitative aspect, rather than a high churn of companies that have been loosely supported, if you like. Now, as you can imagine, now that we are then in a position to also invest, and that is a great privilege. So we have a fund which is based in the United States, again backed mainly by former founders in science that have done very well for themselves and now are looking to give back. So some of them are also instructors at Skills, and we're also back, and this is I don't think I can quite yet share the name, but we were very surprised to be able to secure the backing of a pharma conglomerate, which is highly unusual for, if you like, a very early stage fund doing what are, in their eyes, very small tickets. So we would be the first allocation of capital within any company that we build, and we tend to actually co-invest with larger funds than us. So if we're not the larger investor on the cap table, actually we would be the second largest. And really we spend our time making sure that our founders develop an organic and good relationship with the lead investor, and then we just follow the lead investor, and we maintain the level of trust. Now, once you have the money in the bank, the difficult part starts, if you like, because then you need to start getting operationally minded, and you're executing. And so there is a whole range of activities that need to be taken care of, including massive recruitment of teams. So teams can go from 2 people to 15 people within a month. You have last bits to deal with from an IP perspective. So either you're finalizing the licensing agreement with the university, or you are trying to secure further licenses, and so we remain involved as an advisory post the investment. And really from an involvement perspective, and this is really the more recent piece, and I think that last time that I was in Geneva with you guys, we were also talking about how is Switzerland doing from an infrastructure perspective. One of the biggest challenges that we face in the UK, but also in other countries within Europe, is fundamentally there is a lack of lab. And we've been aware of this for a while. It's great that there are articles in the FT, and there's much more awareness about this. And so we're privileged to have some of the largest landlords in the UK reaching out, asking us to help them design lab spaces, and really this allows us to make sure that whatever company that we build is supported up until the point of being able to secure also quality and collaborative infrastructure facilities. And so you can see the flow here. We've been doing this with a range of companies. We started off, institutions and universities. We started off with the 3 that you see on the left, so Cambridge, Imperial, and Oxford. And then from there we grew organically. I don't think that this is updated, but it's just to show the cross-pollination aspect. So all of the classes, if you like, bring all of these different postdocs and science professionals in the same room. But just to look at the end product, if you like, and I'm going to scan very, very quickly because I don't know how interesting this is at this time, but the end result is that we end up building companies that are solving huge challenges. So for example, with Shamit and Anshika, both fellows, we are building a neuromorphic computing platform that is looking to make drug discovery much more effective. And this is, Shamit coming from Boston University via Oxford University, and then resigning to start the company full time. And likewise, Anshika joined as a COO, having done a specialist course to help product managers understand what it means to be an operator within science. The highly exciting company that is now based in London, and that has a team of over, I think, counting almost 10 people now. Likewise, Expression Edits. So Cart as well was a fellow. and the transition here was a bit different in the sense that they came up with an invention that was then, of course, presented to the tech transfer office at Cambridge University, and then the tech transfer and CART had to entertain a negotiation, and so CART went through a very diligent process of understanding, okay, who can help me in the process of setting up the company from scratch, including defining the team, defining the strategy, interacting with the first early users of the technology. And again, another example over how through sheer work, and really what we're doing is, if you like, overworking anyone else out there, but through sheer work we were able to secure terms that are now a precedent for other companies. We were also privileged to see that Professor Alan Bradley, who is a very established professor but also founder, so with 3 exits, is the co-founder of this company, and that has allowed us to again attract an incredible talent pool and source of capital for that round. And companies, again, just because we talked about Oxford, we talked about Cambridge, and Ola started her company at Imperial College, and the company is looking to in effect change the way that we recycle batteries, and is now growing the team, and we're very proud of the work that she's doing. Just flashing some faces around the different instructors that we are joined by. So for example, you recognize here Salim. It says 500 startups, but actually it should be updated to the fact that he's now the MD of Techstars in London, for example. Ilan, again, this should be updated. He was the founder of Activate and is now the CEO at ARIA, which is the equivalent of ARPA in the UK. And you've got a range of exited founders and GPs that have helped us with this. Lita Nelson, of course, as we were chatting earlier, you are as a recovering TTO. She is probably our queen or our master of affairs. So she is the person who started MIT's TTO and set the standard over what an ideal spin-out term should look like. Some of faces here, again, a mixture between founders and exited investors. But overall, this is a real asset of that we have so far. We have a growing community of qualified scientists who have gone through a process of personal growth, and really what the most incredible bit is seeing the level of confidence coming out and the level of foresight in the planning of the startup. And so this is just a small gathering that we organize on a monthly basis in London. There are gatherings in Berlin as well, and in Oxford and Cambridge, but the community now is growing. I think we're close to counting 200 fellows, and from a capacity perspective, we're producing 50 fellows a year. So we're very happy that we are able to bring so much knowledge, or distribute knowledge at scale, while still maintaining a personable tone with everyone, and we're always seeking to expand this. So we have invited, of course, your colleagues at CERN to join us for the next fellowship taking place in November, and of course. And then hopefully that will lead to perhaps a spin out and then an investment, and that's what we hope that can happen for us. Some links over how to find us, but I'm sure that that's going to be easy.
CEO of a company, and with that, so Shamit, you can see me and you can hear me, okay?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So we just went through the, maybe you were part of that, but we just went through a couple of slides, just showing some faces around the different work and different founders that we've worked with. And of course, we could not mention you and Ashika and the work that we've done together over the last year and a half. So just for the benefit of the crowd that is both on Zoom, but also here at CERN, I figured that I could ask you a couple of questions around basically relatable matters, and perhaps we could start from the beginning over how from a mindset perspective, did it feel for you to closing a huge chapter and a very important chapter of your life, which has been that of being a researcher and academic, and transitioning in a quite a determined way into basically a whole new road of into the real world, if you like, that of business. Do you recount those days that we were talking, and what was going through your head at the time?
Yes, absolutely. So I think, I know if you were able to share some context, Ali, so I'll just talk a little bit about what we are doing, and then I can build the context around it. So we are Apoha. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Apoha, where we are building what we call a liquid brain. Now, to this audience, I can tell that it's actually literally a processor made of soft material, and it uses principles of complex systems.
Shamit, hold on a second. Sorry. We're trying to sort out the volume.
Okay, yeah, I can.
Sorry, mate. Okay. Now let's give it another go.
Absolutely. So yeah, I was just saying to give some context to what we are doing, and then it would make sense to go to the context. Oh, sorry, to my background. So yeah, I was saying that we are building Apoha, where I'm a co-founder and the CEO. And at Apoha, we are building what we call a liquid brain. And to this audience, I can say that it is essentially literally a processor made of soft materials and uses physics of complex systems. So that's calling that a liquid brain is like literally kind of trying to create an image in the minds of people, like the kind of audience that we usually work with, from customers to investors. And yeah, I mean, that was like calling some, like I never imagined the research I do, I would call it a liquid brain. So this already kind of gives an indication of the mindset changes that happen. But I think this is also, something that I learned over the period that Ali was speaking about. So what we are building now is essentially based on like a decade plus of research on, fundamental questions around why our neurons are so damn energy efficient. And this was my research. I was working on clearly it's a very important topic, but it was getting lost somewhere in, we know all of us know like the challenges that there are in academia. And so like around 2017 or so, I started thinking about, my research was motivated pretty much around fundamental questions in neuroscience. But what is it that I can do with it from the perspective of creating the kind of impact I always imagined? I was trained as an engineer. My original bachelor's was in mechanical engineering, and then I did biomedical engineering, biophysics, and so on and so forth. So their engineering mindset was always there, trying to build things that create impact. And although I love science and went very deep into it, all the way to the foundational and first principles of neuroscience, I wanted to come out of that word. And now that what I've learned, I want to create something out of it. And so around 2017, I started thinking, during my PhD, when I was trying to understand the reasons for the efficiency of a neuron, kind of taking inspiration from Richard Feynman's famous words, what I cannot create, I do not understand. And using that, we in the end ended up making a synthetic neuron. And this whole effort so far has been to come up with a journey where we can scale the synthetic neuron and build this liquid brain. Now, I think in the end, it was really figuring out, and there are a couple of key concepts, I think, which I've learned, of course, through BSF courses, from Wilbe were like the key inputs in that journey. But kind of, how do you think about deep tech? How do you come up with the metrics of making progress in that deep tech? How do you package the value that you create in this journey in terms of, making people feel that they should invest in this idea? And this is, for different audience, it could be different. I find it much more easier to work with customers because I really understand the key problem there. And then I can kind of package my technology in the form of what we call a minimum viable product as something that can solve the customer problem. And in the process, we build it a little bit, move forward, solve new problem, build it a little bit, move forward. And at each step, we say we created a value where you can put some money number or asset value to it. And this is completing that journey from being a really fundamental researcher, working in a lab, building instruments and solving scientific equations and optimizing systems, to now maybe dealing with a bigger problem or like a more complex problem with more access, where you have more constraints. And these constraints, like in physics, we are used to working with the constraints of laws of physics, energy, entropy, and whatnot. I think you add more constraints when you come out of the academia, and the constraints are social and economical. And how do you optimize now what you want to build with these additional constraints? So I think, yeah, this is the kind of thinking I have evolved, I guess. And yeah, this journey has been really about kind of breaking the journey down. What could take 10, 20 years? How can you start making something valuable real, which can have an impact in 1 year or 6 months or 3 months? We now work in 2-week sprints. So that's and 2-week sprints for something, for a vision that could take 20 years. So that's I think the mindset change.
Shifting from what was initially fundamental research and
I need to go the other way around. Now you can.
okay. So switching from what was in effect your priority was fundamental research for a big part of your academic career, to then moving to, okay, we need to make marginal improvements to a product now, no longer research. And it has to be something that is relatable not only to other researchers from the field, but actually to people that would be holding this technology in their hands without knowing what's inside the box. And that is part of I guess part of the big mindset shift that becoming an entrepreneur requires. I heard absolutely.
Shamit's on mute.
He's on mute.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. No, so I was just saying that you're right, Ale. Like, I mean, I didn't even touch on that part. So the whole idea of, like, in academia, we are very used to, you know, as soon as now, especially in the time of preprints and archive, as soon as we write first draft, we just basically go out and put it in the public. And that is certainly, you know, a big change in the mentality in terms of you have to think strategically in terms of at what point will you be releasing what aspect of your journey, or like of your what you have built. So, and then the strategy is really aligned with what are the first areas where you'll be exposing yourself. And this exposure could be due to your working in academic partnership outside academia. It could be due to working with customers, and then you work with lawyers and you have a roadmap, and you have to strategize, like, on top of the complexity of investment, raising money and working with customers. You have to think, how does your IP strategy align with your roadmap? So absolutely, Ale, that's also been a very different part. And it's not that we don't publish, I guess. We want to publish a lot. We are really deep science company in the end, and we want same validation as academia. The only difference, I think, is that you have to time it strategically, and you have to be strategic about which part of the research should happen first, and maybe some part of it you keep internal for some time and then release it later, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that certainly changes.
I've got tons of other questions. One second. I've got tons of other questions, of course, but we could still spend a lot of time chatting about what we've done, how we've done it. But I'm keen for the floor here, and you may not be able to see them yet, Shamit, but see if the floor has any questions or feels that any of this is relatable, is completely actually new, even if other terms that were not relatable, like we talked about minimum viable product. Does that mean anything for you guys? There's not many nodding to that. So that we speak the same language. Shamit, are you okay to share what an MVP stands for, and how does that play a role when you are doing the first step towards commercialization of your research?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, kind of going back to my academic days, back then I was working with basically new materials, building experimental setups, kind of looking for new physics based on the instruments I built into new materials and different physical phenomena that happen in that. And through that, we basically kind of learned some new principles that apply to the kind of complex materials that we deal with. And so the knowledge was very much at a principle level, but there was this vision of how these principles can actually enable us to sensing and computing in ways that we are not able to do today. And by not able to do, it could be, it could have two axes at least. You can think in terms of capabilities of the computer. For example, a computer or sensors today are still not good at classifying chemicals, like classifying taste, smell. We are really good at classifying image and speech data, but we are not good at classifying senses. taste and smell and feeling and things like that. So that is capability, right? This is the capability that we don't have, and that society doesn't have, and we believe we can build it. On the performance axis, there is this whole question of sustainability of computing, as in computers today are so inefficient that, for example, if you want to simulate a protein for its conformational dynamics for 1 millisecond, it could take the power of 5 million CPUs. Someone actually did this a couple of years ago for simulating a spike protein, and that was enough power to shut down a country like Denmark. So even things that might seem trivial, may not seem trivial to people who know about this, simulating a protein for 1 millisecond, it can take a lot of energy. And there's this whole problem of the Moore's law coming to an end, and the people are looking in the sector of neuromorphic computing and quantum computing. And so Brain has always been a big inspiration when it comes to computing architecture, how we can improve computing, or how even think about computing and intelligence in general. So there was these two axes. And during this journey, what we realized is that, there's this the performance is something that you can always keep improving, but capabilities really make the inflection points. So this was an early point. Usually the computing story, it might seem like it could be, this was my realization and might not be true for everyone. But although the computing story seems very grand, we found that it's easier to find customers and solve really painful problems very early on if we build on capabilities and then improve performance later on. And so essentially an MVP is a minimum viable product, which means something that is end-to-end. It's if someone thousands of years ago wanted to envision what the future of transportation would be, this MVP journey could be: you first make a skateboard, then you make a bike, then you make a train, and then you make a plane. But every product here is complete in itself, and you can use it for some sort of transportation. And if you are really in the early days where there's no solution at all, even a skateboard might be a good thing, right? So, and that we do find such use cases where, although we are a deep tech company, which ideally would expect would at least take 3-4 years to have something and then go to customer, even before raising the money, we had a customer, or early build partner, like to call them, with whom we had packaged this end to end, and even though it was performing really poorly compared to what it could be, it was like a binary improvement on terms of anything else that they had to do. So they were willing to try and validate the very first version of the technology that I built in my bedroom during COVID, and were excited about it. They invested money in it. I was some part of this equipment requires water to go through it, and I was actually pouring that water with my hand. And this was a scientific instrumentation head R&D of a very big instrumentation company. And somehow I had the confidence that this is the right thing to do, and that I'm not embarrassing myself by showing such a crappy prototype. And I was really surprised. I've always been pleasantly surprised how willing customers are, and our customers are scientists, all our customers are scientists, and how much willing they are to come to our site and pull our product to their side if they really feel that we empathize with them and we really want to solve their problem, and we just don't want their grant money to build something that in the end they don't get. So I think there is this, I have really started enjoying my customer conversation. I think that gives me the most pleasure in terms of anything that I do here. I will be honest, I don't love talking to VCs. Devika and Ali are exception, but because they've always been with us. But I love talking to customers, and it's hard to imagine, but it's really very, very much, it gives a lot of satisfaction.
Open up the questions here as well. Shamit, I've got a few questions, and I'll go around. If anybody has questions, put your hand up as well. Mm-hmm. So you've gone from being a scientist to a founder, loving to talk with customers. So just to, give a peek of, what a founder's time looks like. How much are you spending on science, and how much are you looking at business development, partnership development, rough? Are you doing more science now or less of science?
It's a really good question. It actually depends on the roadmap a lot, and it can change from sprint to sprint. So every 2 weeks, it could be different. To give you an example, before we had any fundraise, right? So of course, there was a lot of business development, in the sense that we were talking to a lot of customers and kind of coming up with our investment memo, as in what is it that we want to build. And apart from this basic prototype, which I just talked about, which we showed to, for which we actually got a partnership agreement, Rest all of my time was going into talking to investors, making materials, talking to customers. There was no science for a period of almost 1 year, except building this prototype, which was, I would say, took me a month in total, like month of 24/7, right? So it was spread over a year. But then since we have money, I think it goes in phases. So first 5 months, I would say I was doing just science. I was actually in the lab. At that time we were 5 people, all science. I mean, apart from my co-founder who comes from business, 4 of us were scientists. One material scientist, was computer scientist, one photonics, and me who brings in few expertise also. And we were all building all the time for 5 months straight. I mean, and during that time we had basically 3 engagements before we did our first fundraise, and we have like weekly engagements with them. So every now and like every week I'll spend a couple of hours on making the presentation and actually having the conversation. But apart from them, we were basically doing experiments, building stuff. And then at 5 or 6 month point, I started to lean out, because then we had to start working on the next stages of new customers, new pilots, new improvements. And then again, I had to go out and talk to customers. At that point, I would say 50-50. And now as we are, and this went on for maybe a month, which is like, we raised money in November. So we are in July. So it's like 8 months or so. And then last month, I've gone to lab twice. And then we have a separate enclosure where we're doing road mapping for next 2-3 years with my co-founder. And then of course, every session involves someone from the rest of the team. They come and join us, and it's all about strategy planning, talking to again new customers, lining up new pilots, new LOIs, letter of intents. So yeah, and then it will be same again. As when we get the next fundraise, I'll go back to building stuff, maybe a little bit less hands-on, but it's still in the lab and still because we have like 2 units, right? So there's always anyway someone working on it, and whenever there's some troubleshooting or something, I do it like with my own hands. So that's kind of how it works.
All right, cool. Second question, I guess, for me is, looking back, what would you do different? Any learnings that, for next founder going through the same thing, like, I wish I didn't do that, kind of not do list?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And somehow I've been thinking about it, but maybe not exactly to that, but I will take that as an excuse to talk about what I've been thinking about.
Yeah,
but I think a big realization, I mean, all of us, I believe, like who are performing at this stage in academia, we have been top performers in our past life at some stage, right? And it's very easy to fall in the trap of exceptionalism, as like you start feeling like, for example, my PhD was amazing. Like the things I proved, back then, it made me feel like, okay, I can do anything now. And what that thought of exceptionalism does is that you start treating yourself differently. You expect the world to work different around you. And this could be, first of all, of course, very damaging in academia, because, we know all the constraints and stresses of academia. But then I think to be able to think, and this was really like the point, there was a point where I kind of started from thinking about that I'm exceptional. I started thinking I have something which I have learned, which is exceptional, right? So kind of separating that was like really a big change. And I think, and you feel that in the team, right? When you hire people, superstars, people who have like done amazing, and we have a team of superstars, and they come out, really all gun blazing. And then again, like, there are things that you can only learn with experience, no matter how smart you are and how much optimization and logic and rationalization and prediction of future paths you can do in your brain. There are things that you learn, and humility that you learn only through experience. I think that humility, I mean, I finished my PhD in 2013-14. So there's been a long journey of developing these ideas and so on and so forth. And I think that is really something, if that would not have changed for me, I would have been not as happy as I am today. That's what I would say. Because even like when you raise money and you go out in the world, and basically when you are talking to investors, almost all the science is left behind, and you have to be very humble and be able to talk in a way that still makes everyone feel, as part of the conversation. You can't talk down to them, and you have to empathize with whoever you talk to. And this exceptionalism has to go out of your brain somehow. And I might say this, I know this is something that you have to, even though someone can tell you, if you are applying exceptionalism, you would not listen to such an advice, and you go, okay, but I'm exceptional. So it's a tricky one, yeah, but I think this is really important.
Any other questions?
I couldn't hear the question actually.
The question was, how did you figure out there was a market for what you invented?
That's a great question. I mean, it's a lot of work. I think there are two kind of philosophies around that. You can create a market and you can tap a market, right? So a lot of people want to talk about creating market or unlocking use case, right? But I think there has to be a near-term strategy and there has to be long-term strategy. Near-term strategy, we also have a word for it. It's called go-to-market. And this is a long topic. I'm sure Devika and Ale would have covered it or would cover it in lengthier session. But the idea is the whole game is really about de-risking what you're building. And so you can think of two axes. One is the axis of risk and the other is the axis of capability. And or essentially the asset or the market that you can potentially hit. Getting that market is a third part of the journey. And in a deep tech company, the way typically in the initial years you work is that you target some market, which could be essentially thinking about many things your technology can do. You have to do the first layer of thinking yourself. What are the things you think you can solve? And then basically talk to customers. You have to talk to people who are working in that field. I talk to First of all, my first level of contact, like on first layer of network on LinkedIn or Facebook, people I hadn't spoken to 10 years and they are working in a field which is relevant. And then essentially, they would usually introduce you to someone else who are in the field that might be more relevant to what you're doing. And I think especially if you're working with scientists, they can even help you. Like you have to give them a little bit. Of course, be very careful about IP and everything before that, but you have to give them a little bit to help them think on your behalf. And this is how you kind of realize your early use cases, which could be somewhat commercial. They don't need to have a huge market for your early use cases. What you need to show is that you can solve a problem no one else can. And once you have that with some commercial, backing, then you need to find a path to a bigger market, which seems logical and rational in the sense your technology builds and the sense the market can be tapped. So building from one use case to the other one, and in the process, you can improve your technology, hit the other use case, improve your technology, and you pile up these potential use cases with the total market of something. And the idea is that essentially what you are doing in this entire process is saying that what we have built has been de-risked for this much market. And now we have built this, which has been de-risked for this much market, and so on and so forth. And this could be the end goal, could be anything. I mean, if you really build a liquid brain today, I mean, what value would you put to that? Like there's no market. But then we talk about, okay, improving a molecule in improving a protein in dairy sector, which then there is a very specific market, right? So you start with something simple, or sensing a molecule which other detectors cannot solve or cannot sense. Then you can at least compare yourself with a market of detectors that are out there. You'll find a lot of reports about that. So it's essentially about building a story. I think that would be the long answer. And then there is, of course, longer answers, which I'm sure you will come across.
So last one. Now, I promise, Shamit, I'll let you.
No, it's fine. I'm enjoying it.
By the way, if you ever come by this side, more than welcome to come to CERN. We love physicists here.
Thanks, Ash.
So, you kind of said you're not that much of a fan of talking to VCs. I don't want to go into the whole rap sheet of what all you don't like, and I think there's enough.
Yeah.
But what are the challenges you face, as a scientist going and pitching money? What help you got? At least your framework and playbook of, what to avoid and what to look for.
Yes. So I would say our current VCs are amazing, right? And we were a little bit lucky because I think when you are doing the first fundraise, there could be a tendency that you get a little bit desperate and then get anyone, who is willing to give you money on board. And I wouldn't say we were like super cocky about it, that we only get best. And we were a little bit open in that sense. But in the end, we were fortunate that the three leading names on our cap table, we really like them and we're really happy. And similarly out there, when we talk to people and talk to VCs, I would say out of 100 conversations, 10 are really good. Out of 100 conversations with customers, I like 100 of them, or maybe 95 of them. So that's the difference. Now, in terms of what helps in talking to VC, I think one thing that I've found is that first of all, there are a lot of VCs who are very socially active, as in on social websites, and there are some which you would not find much online. And you have to be careful about what their social persona is and things they talk about and what they are really maybe interested in the end. I think and in the end, what helps is having a clear clarity on exactly what you want to build. And I mean, this conviction comes only with mind, only with time. You have to talk to your friends, you have to talk to your customers. I mean, no one else. This is the curse and the boon of being a founder, I guess. The buck stops with you. So you have to make a decision. What is it that you want to build? You have to decide your values and your tenets as soon as you start the company. Or before that, you have to really think about what kind of company, what kind of culture you want to build. And then you just stick to that and only pitch that and see who is willing to invest in you and with whom are you having conversations. For example, one of the VCs who are actually on our board. I mean, typically when you go to a VC conversation, even though you share material, they might not have read any of it, or they might not have even Googled you. So you have to basically, explain and introduce to them everything. Versus there could be VCs who have already done their homework. They kind of even start pitching it back to you, okay, or playing it back to you. So this is what you're doing. And if you see or hear in their words that they're actually getting the idea, or they are actually thinking along similar lines, which really happened with us, that's when you know these are the right VCs for you. And then negotiations and all those things can happen. But I think finding someone who's excited exactly about what you want to do is really the key. Also, I think there will always be hit and miss in terms of, in some cases, we felt that you would have to have early conversations with someone. There will be always someone you will go to first. And at that time, you will be least prepared. And over time, you get more prepared and more prepared. And so we also feel that some of the VCs with whom we did not get an offer in the beginning, if we were every conversation we learned something, our story improves, our clarity improves. And if finally the story on which we actually raised the money, if we would have gone to them with the same story, I think they would have been interested, but we did not have enough clarity back then. And this is all about, when I'm saying clarity, it's all about, really clearing the narrative, really presenting the story on principal components and not some, it could be very complex what you're doing, but you have to find the principal component of what you're doing and present that. So I think that's really the key. Sorry about that.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.